You're listening to episode 30 of the Ento Podcast, and on this week's show we look at Kenyan rural women take up cricket rearing as an alternative source of protein, inside the World's Fair Nano, the future is cricket flour, Lulzbots, and VR-synced Fleshlights. Will it fly? Australians encouraged to embrace insect-based foods. So all of that coming up on this week's episode of the Ento Podcast, so stay tuned.
Looking to stay up to date on all things entomorphagy? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Ento Podcast with your host, Ross Bell.
Hi, and welcome to episode 30 of the Ento Podcast, the show that brings you the latest news and views from the world of entomorphagy and insects as animal feed. And I'm your host, Ross Bell. So this week we got three stories, and the first story comes from xinhuanet, and it's by Wangu. Sorry, I'm presuming I've massively mispronounced your name there. Thanks for the story. And it's Kenyan rural women take up cricket rearing for alternative source of protein. When Jane Maribi's granddaughter was diagnosed with acute malnutrition 6 months ago, she had limited know-how on the best remedy for the condition, and only wallowed in self-pity as a humble house located in rural central Kenya. The 62-year-old farmer was at wit's end, having no stable source of income to afford a balanced diet for their granddaughter, as recommended by the physician. Maribi is currently raising 3 of her grandchildren, following the demise of her only daughter 1 year ago. However, her search for an affordable and sustainable source of protein for her granddaughter led to her discovering cricket powder, which, as she put it, got her granddaughter's growth curve back on track. Scientists have cited in the past that crickets are a great source of protein compared to soybeans and beef, which are among the conventional sources of protein. In Maribi's case, the insects, which are slowly finding their way into Kenyan recipes, have proved their worth. At first, when a friend recommended cricket powder and promised to get me some from her source in West Kenya, I almost turned down the offer since I'd never heard of it, Mbrini told Zuna. But my opinions were limited. My dairy cows don't earn me enough to afford the kind of food that these children are supposed to eat. She has since embraced cricket powder and has immensely improved her granddaughter's health and is contemplating on rearing the insect herself. In our last visit to the doctor 1 month ago, I was very happy with the results as my grandchild had now gained weight unlike previous visits, Maribi said. The cricket powder is not as expensive as other flours, and now that I have an established relationship with the supplier, I get discounts from time to time. Initially she brought the cricket powder from a farmer in West Kenya, but has now established a new source not far from her home, where cricket farmer is gaining traction. I also plan to venture into cricket farming, which from what I see is paying more than even my dairy farm, as crickets are not capital intensive, Mbrini said. She belongs to a growing army of smallhold farmers who have gradually embraced cricket farming. Joseph Carrier took up cricket farming recently. The cost of establishing a basic system is about $30 in addition to the cost of the initial breeding colony of crickets. To start such a colony, at least 200 crickets are required, and the colony should not be used for feeding until well established and their first babies mature into adults. Cairo, who has a bachelor's degree in nutrition, saw the rising demand for cricket powder as an alternative source of protein for people residing in rural areas. I come across many cases of malnourished children. I realize that there is a need for alternative source of protein after a recent assignment in Turkana, where for every 10 babies that I attended to, more than 7 suffered from high protein energy malnutrition, Cairo told Zina. Even though most Kenyans are still debating on whether to embrace alternative eating habits, there are those like Maribi and Karo doing it and seeing the results. There's a group of women in western Kenya who are already earning huge income from cricket farming, and that is where I got some of the tips on cricket rearing, Kira said. Members of the group, made of 20 farmers, rear crickets on their own, but market their products collectively. One of their clients is a leading hotel in Kisumu, a lakeside city in western Kenya. This is where I came across the different ways in which crickets can be prepared, Kero said. According to Kero, a kilogram of crickets can sell for approximately $5. $5 is a good price. We are still far from embracing such an alternative source of vital nutrients, but with proper marketing and health campaigns, I believe Kenyans will respond positively. This is a great story, even though I butchered enough every single name in there. So sorry guys for butchering your names. But just the co-op mentality of each farmer raising their own, taking it to one large market where they can combine all their efforts together, get paid a good price for their crickets. Those crickets are then sold on to, in this case, sort of hotels or restaurants. So everyone's winning. And again, the nutrients that they need. The second story this week is inside the World's Fair. The future is cricket flour, Lulzbots, and VR-synced Fleshlights. And this comes from the Gothamist, and it's by Dale Markowitz. In the future, we'll commute on electric skateboards, eat apples that never brown, and drink a lot of Soylent. Or so it would seem from the vision of the future on display at this weekend's World's Fair Nano, which is currently in its second year. Under a banner that reads Future of Food, fair organisers handed out free bottles of cacao Soylent, and the company's Seek showed off a glass terrarium full of live crickets. Beside it stood a mason jar filled to the brim with dead crickets and a coffee grinder that pulverized their corpses into cricket powder. The secret sauce that gives the company's cinnamon almond crunch granola 7 grams of protein per serving. Arctic seeds, dried apple slices, genetically engineered to never turn brown. They were turning brown, and a rep from the company clarified that the brownness was caused by the drying and that the fresh apples don't brown. Over by a group of food electronics companies, I found one of the festival's most practical future food innovators, a $199 portable gluten sensor called Nemo. Users place food samples in a disposable cartridge about the size of a C battery, and custom-engineered antibodies inside them bind to the gluten molecules in the food, which the sleek triangular NEMA sensors detect within 2 to 3 minutes. But at around $5 per one-use capsule, the system isn't cheap, but the price point could be right for the company's next, possibly life-saving device, which is due to launch this winter, a portable peanut sensor. Next to NEMA, I discovered Pico Brews, Pico Model C, a Keurig for home-brewed beer. About the size of a coffee maker, it converts Pico packs, custom blends of hops and grains that match the recipe of over 150 breweries, into 5 litres of beer that's fermented, carbonated, and ready to drink within 10 to 15 days. A 500-foot electric skateboard mega-track separated the future of food area from the VR displays, where fairgoers zapped by on booted action and mellow boards. And past the skateboard highway in the VR demo area sponsored by Samsung, I rode an impressively lifelike virtual roller coaster while wearing a Gear VR headset and sitting in a synced motorized chair. In other booths, guests played with VR games in haptic feedback suits on omnidirectional treadmills. Startups demoed more business-minded applications for VR and 3D modeling, along with companies with VR Fleshlights. But as this is a family show, if you want to read more about the Fleshlights, you're going to have to look at the article for yourself. You can find that in the show notes. So it sounds like quite a good World's Fair. It's good to see that Seek were out there showing off their cricket granola. I wouldn't mind looking at the Pico Brews little brewery setup. I've had the chance to use the Samsung's Gear VR, and the roller coaster one's quite good. There's a Soyuz space station VR demo that you can go in where British astronaut Tim Peake sort of guides you through what it's like to come through or to come back to Earth from Soyuz. That was really good. The graphics were a lot better from when I was younger and the VR first came out, and it was quite blocky. Now it's really good, so interested to see where the VR goes as well. The final story for today, though, is Will It Fly? Australians encouraged to embrace insect-based foods. And this comes from SBS and it's by Katrina Yu. A growing number of entrepreneurial foodies are trying to convince the world that insects belong on our dinner plates. Massimo Reveri, who is the founder of startup Bugsolutely, is one of them. The Italian entrepreneur is about to launch a line of chips across China made from silkworm powder. The range includes salt and vinegar and Szechuan red pepper. It was an alternative way to introduce edible insects to people making chips. We use the help of food engineers to find flavors which appeal to the Chinese market, Mr. Reveri said. And in the future, he hopes to distribute his pasta made with cricket powder in Australia. The product is made from cricket powder sourced from Thailand, where farming cricket is traditional. It has a nutty flavour, and most people tell me they'd never know it was in there just by tasting it, Massimo said. Through packing insects into everyday mainstream food items, he hopes to overcome the initial yuck factor in consumers. But when you explain that there's no big difference between shrimp and a cricket, and probably even healthier, they start thinking there isn't a logical reason not to eat them. An investor in Bugsolutely is Shanghai-based food technology accelerator Bits and Bytes, or Bits v Bytes, a venture capital firm which focuses on sustainable food projects. It's another food source we've just forgotten because of social stigma and behavioural habit. I'm not strongly suggesting that we convert our entire diet into insects. I believe in a balanced approach, and I really want people to have an open mind, Bits and Bytes program director Erickson said. Kerry Wilson from Adelaide University has been researching Australian consumer attitudes towards insects and hope more Australians will embrace the trend of insect-based foods. There are always going to be a proportion of consumers who, for them, eating insects is never going to fly. But absolutely there are people within our population willing to give it a go. And it's not just for the novelty factor. To produce insects, we need to use less feedstock, less water, less space. So there's lots of reasons why we should be eating them. But links to this article and all the others will be in the show notes. But that's great news for Massimo that he's got a new product out and hope to try and get into the Chinese market. And I hope the chip launch goes well. But that's it for this week. Don't forget that if you're in the UK and interested in trying to incorporate crickets, either whole or powdered, don't forget to go over to Crick8 and pick up a packet of their cricket protein powder. Find out more at krica.co.uk. Till next time, this is Ross saying, ta-ra for now.
Thanks so much for listening to the Ento Podcast. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit theentopodcast.co.uk and on Facebook and Twitter at the Ento Podcast. We'll catch you next time.